Welcome to the Children's Author Show. If you ever dreamed of writing a book that inspires young minds, builds a lasting brand, and even creates a sustainable career, then you're in the right place. From crafting unforgettable stories, to marketing your books, to even monetizing your brand, we'll cover everything that you need to succeed as a children's author. So grab your notebook, fuel that creativity, and let's make your author dreams a reality. This is the Children's Author Show. Welcome to the Children's Author Show. My name is Andy Coates. I'm an award-winning author, book coach, and your host of the Children's Author Show. And this is the podcast where we help authors just like you build your author brand by learning more about the industry and hearing from industry experts. Whether you're just starting out or you're looking to grow, you are in the right place. And today we have a very special treat for you. We have a children's book author who is also a branding expert and marketing coach. And she's joining us to discuss her journey, as well as talk about how with the right guidance, you can see significant growth as a children's author. So welcome to the podcast, Lauren Ranalli. Lauren, glad to have you.
Hi, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
For sure. So instead of me just reading a bio and talking, I'd rather just us jump into learning some of your story. And I want you to know I'm very excited about today. So let's start with the author side of your journey first. Maybe just share with us like your journey into becoming a writer. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm somebody who has always enjoyed writing, in school and growing up. But, I loved my English classes. I loved my creative writing classes. Anytime I had that, even going back, further in elementary school, library was my favorite of the kind of special classes that you got to go to. When I was in fifth grade, I would volunteer in the library and read to the kindergarten classes and those sorts of things. So children's books have always been something that I loved. My son is now 13. So, 13 years ago, when my first child was born, he's a December birthday, and we are an interfaith family. So we celebrate both Hanukkah and Christmas. And so when he was born in December, he got a bunch of Christmas books as like gifts, baby gifts and things like that. And I thought, I'll go out and buy some Hanukkah books just, to add to our bookshelf. And I couldn't find what I wanted. I found a lot of things that felt a little bit, too cutesy for my taste. It was like Elmo celebrates Hanukkah or Curious George celebrates Hanukkah, which was fine. Or it was like the other end of the spectrum. It was like the history of the Maccabees, right? It was like this like very sort of like religious text. And I was like, where are the stories about just a family celebrating this holiday? Right. And, I thought about it. And one day while I was driving to work, at the time I was living in Chicago, this story of the Great Laka Cook-Off and a family cooking contest during the 8 nights of Hanukkah just downloaded in my brain. And I got to my computer and I kind of typed it up. And then I just sat on it for, ultimately a long time. I sat on it for about 6 years because I first thought, I'll just email it to myself. And when he's a few years old, I'll start reading it to him. Because he was at the time, he was only a couple months old. And a few years later, I kept thinking about it. It kept sort of coming back to me. And I was somebody who I knew nothing about publishing. I did not know that the world of self-publishing even existed. I thought you had to have an agent and a publisher to do anything in this space. So I didn't do anything. And then when he was probably about 5 years old, I was having coffee with a friend who told me that they had just, published a book. They published like a novella. And I said, well, who published it? How did you publish? He said, well, I did. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I don't know what that means.
I know that, but
yeah, it's like, obviously your name's on the book, but like, what? I was like, what do you mean you published it? And he's like, no, I published it. And I started looking into this, and it took me down a whole journey of learning about self-publishing. And when my son was 6, I put out my first book, and I now have 4 books out in the world. And it's been just this kind of incredible learning experience. I was about to say roller coaster. It hasn't really been a roller coaster. It's just been this like like really like lovely, learning experience about how to get your workout into the world.
What were those books in your release order? Like,
Yes.
what that look like?
So my first book is called The Great Laka Cook-Off, and it's, like I said, it's a story of a cooking contest over the 8 nights of Hanukkah. The second book that I published, which was not actually the second one I wrote, but the second one I published was a story called Places We Have Never Been. And it is about a love of like travel and learning about other cultures. And it's a series of questions that you can ask about a place, imagining a place you've never been in your mind. And, how long would it take to get there? Do you have to travel overnight? What do you see and smell and hear when you arrive? How did they say hello? How did they say friend? So what I
I
love
love
about
that.
that one is that you can pick a new place every time you read it. So it can be
Yeah.
a different story, which is also really nice for parents. Like, because
Yeah.
you know that like if you read these books over and over and over again, it's kind of nice to
Right.
change up. So that was the second book. The
Nice.
third book I wrote was called Let's Meet on the Moon. And it's a story of long distance friendship and letter writing. And that was inspired by, we had friends on our street who were moving. They weren't even moving far away. They were moving like, 15, 20 minutes away. But it felt like this big thing for our kids and our neighborhood that their friends were moving away. And interestingly enough, I wrote that book pre-COVID, but it came out during the first year of COVID. And it kind of took on this other meaning of like, how do we stay connected when we
Oh,
can't see the
wow.
people we love? And then my fourth book, the last one I put out, is called Snow Day at the Zoo. And it's a story of what happens when zookeepers' children kind of get snowed in with their favorite animal friends. That one was actually the second book that I wrote, but it became the fourth book that I published because, well, one, COVID happened in between, and I was the illustrator that I worked with on that particular book. She was doing hand painted illustrations, whereas my illustrator for the other three was doing digital illustrations. So it's just a completely different journey.
Yeah.
But that one came out last year.
Okay. Also, what inspired you? What was like that moment for you that decided to go? Because I mean, I'm assuming that's not your background. Is just you've been doing this. I mean, only for 6 years. So,
Yeah.
um, so what inspired you to get into the children's book
Yeah.
writing?
And I mean, for me, it was really about, especially for that first one, wanting, like, realizing there was a story that I wanted to read to my kids that didn't exist. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of that, of like feeling like, okay, like this is a thing that I think should be out there. And it didn't exist in the way that I wanted it to. And then once I started and I published, I just kind of got hooked, and it
Yeah.
was these other stories would sort of, it's interesting to me because every book that I've written, the story has come to me almost like in a complete thought, right? Like it's sort of like I have this idea and like, boom, I know what the story is going to be. And obviously you tweak it and you do some, developmental editing and all of that. But if there is a story that I'm wrestling with too much, I'm like, oh, maybe this just isn't the right one to put out there. Like I've
Yeah.
got as many authors do. I'm sure I've got a notebook of some other ideas, but
Yeah.
each of these, it was like I knew exactly what that story arc was.
Yeah.
Even Snow Day at the Zoo, which is a rhyming book, like I just sort of sat down and I was like, boom, ultimately you tweak it for the cadence and making sure that like the words are the timing and things are hitting correctly, but I just kind of knew. So initially it was about, filling a gap that I saw. And then after that, it was just, this is a fun thing that can be done. It's a great creative outlet. And my kids were young at the time. So it was really fun to write stories for their age group.
So along the way, I'm sure that like most of us in this space, we learn some things as
Yeah.
we go through the experience. And so what are some of those big lessons in that journey that you would say that you walk away with that you learned along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing I learned all of this is about the very viable space and option for self-publishing. And I think there is this pervasive myth or belief that self-publishing is the default for people who can't get a publisher.
Right.
And that is not true. Like that,
Right.
it's a very active choice to decide to self-publish. And there's a lot of good reasons to do it that we can talk about. But I think that was the biggest thing I learned is like, one, this is a thing that people do. And two, it's not because I have been, I didn't even try to get, a publisher. It wasn't that I was like rejected by 12 publishers. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll do this, which would also be a fine choice. But like, it was a decision I made to have more autonomy and ownership over the experience and the timeline. Like publishing, I have learned it is such a long process when you are working with finding a publisher, getting an agent, you're on their timeline. I know so many authors who during COVID had their books bumped, right? Like their stuff got bumped a year or two. And for me, with the self-publishing process is I've been able, aside from Snow Day at the Zoo, where we were just taking a lot of time with the illustrations, but the other 3 books, they went from concept to print within 10 months. And, that was a real thing that was like, I'm not a very patient person. And so the idea of being like, yeah, you can put a book out there and it will hit the shelves in 2 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Doesn't sit well with me.
Which is very common in the traditional publishing industry is
very common.
From manuscript complete to sitting on a shelf may take 2 to 4 years.
Could take 2 to 4 years. And so that to me, I think was like the biggest thing I learned in this is that like you can have a really good, profitable, exciting, fulfilling experience as a self-publisher.
Yeah. One of the things that, with self-publishing, you obviously have a whole lot more control in the process and even in the writing and the themes and the messages that you kind of weave into the stories. For you, do you start out with those or is that something that just kind of happens? What's that process look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I do start out with them. Like I said, the first one was really about sort of filling this gap and showing the experience of a family celebrating a holiday. Also, I didn't want it to it doesn't revolve around gift giving. There's no gifts in this. This is really about like the experience of cooking. And like whenever like I think about Hanukkah, I think about making my grandmother's latke recipe, which is in the book, and like we share with others. And Places We Have Never Been was really, it was written at a time where, I want to say this without like getting political, but it was written at a time where I felt like our country was so scared of people from other countries. Like it just felt like this was like a thing. And so I wanted to just sort of, provide a space where you could talk about this idea of visiting new places and that being an opportunity for learning and excitement and learning about other cultures without that feeling scary. And so that was really what was behind this second book. And then, like I said, with Let's Meet on the Moon, it was really about this experience of like what happens when friends move away, but it just became so much more about like, how do we, during COVID, it was about, well, how do we stay connected to the people who live 6 houses down the road that like we're not seeing in this very immediate situation. And then Snow Day at the Zoo was just fun. Yeah.
What would you say are some of the key ingredients when it comes to great children's books? You work with a lot of authors, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. What are some of those key ingredients to making great children's books?
Yeah. So I think, certainly thinking back to like, what were the stories you remember as a kid? Or if you're a parent or an educator, what are the stories that like the kids you are with, or a caregiver, like what are the ones that they gravitate to? And usually, there is like, there's something special about it, right? There's that little piece. And then I have to say, the illustrations are such a huge component of it. And one of the things that I have worked with a lot of authors on is the fact that like, I've seen many, 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 many people who either kind of to save money, maybe cut corners with illustrations or decide to illustrate their book themselves because they like to draw. And I'm like, that is very different than being an illustrator who can help tell your story, right? So much of the story can be told through illustration and it adds to it so that you're not also saying every single thing that's happening in your book. that your readers can like, they can be perceptive and they can pick up on things. Or, in a couple of my books, I have like a, like in Let's Meet on the Moon, every page has a mailbox like hidden somewhere, right? Or in Snow Day at the Zoo, there's a cardinal and a little alpaca who show up like on every page. And I think that I really do believe that the illustrations are such a key component, and it's not a place to sort of skimp out. And so I think that's something that I've had to work with a number of the authors that I work with on, and saying like, I call it like the Barnes and Noble test, essentially, which is like, imagine your book sitting on the shelf in Barnes and Noble. Does it look like it belongs there? Right. And like, it needs to look like it belongs there. This is a professional thing that you're putting out.
I call that shelfology.
Yes,
So you're
exactly.
studying the shelf to see, does your book match up on that shelf? I love that, because I think that's a lot of new authors in particular, or those who are just getting started. Maybe they have a book, but wondering why it's not moving and why there's not traction.
Yeah.
And the illustrations are, they help tell the story, but they also capture the eye.
Yeah.
So it's the starting point to your story being unlocked is those illustrations.
Absolutely.
So for you, when it comes to in your writing journey, like, how did that, especially working with the illustration side too, how did that change your perspective on the storytelling? Like what shifted for you in your journey that you said, this kind of changed my perspective on what I thought?
I think that some of it was really about recognizing their contribution to the story overall. It wasn't just about, I need you to create a visual representation of the words on the page. It's really about, I need you to help create this feeling or this world or whatever it is. And I think that was really helpful, is because, and trusting the illustrator to do that, to not be too prescribed with them. Like, if there are certain things that are a must for you, they're, those like, or a deal breaker, make sure those things are known. But I think that like really trusting your illustrator to sort of add their own expansive thought is key. And that's also one of the reasons why one of the benefits, I think, of self-publishing is that you get to pick your illustrator. And I know a lot of authors who, when they work with the publisher has sort of, like their go-to list of illustrators, and they'll match you up. And sometimes that's fantastic. And I've had some other authors who say, it's just not the style I wanted, but I was in it with this publisher. I didn't feel like I could, I couldn't pull back. I didn't have a lot of authority to say, hey, this isn't working for me. And so, I've had some people come to me after the fact who said, I'm really kind of disappointed with it. It's not that it's not nice. It's just not it's not what I wanted. It's not my vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've several illustrator friends, and one of, they say, working with traditional publishing houses, some of them have never spoken to the author.
Yes.
Even with the project being done and over. So
and that shocked me. Yeah. I heard that too. And I was like, what? How is this not a collaboration? Like, right. Yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah. And of course, they have a machine, so that, they have art directors and all kinds of stuff who are in the mix. So it's a little different process where we have the honor in the self-publishing side, is that we get to be the art director and the editor and the writer. And I think we need a team of people around us who help do that. I think the illustration side is so different than all the rest of that. And if you don't have that background and experience in not just drawing, but or painting or art, but in actual illustration, I would say you need to get somebody else to do it if you want the most potential out of your story.
I agree. I think it is an investment that pays dividends. Like, it does make your book so much better.
Let's shift now. So from the story side, because what drew me into even wanting to have this conversation with you is we both do author coaching, and I'd love to hear more just about like what you're doing and how you're helping authors who are out there. So let's shift a little bit here.
Absolutely.
Because you focus a lot with helping marketing authors with marketing, and those aspiring authors to focus on the writing, but not just the writing piece, but those who are struggling on the building of their brand and the marketing side. So let's start with that marketing. Why is that such a strong, an important piece in the journey for an
Yeah.
author?
Well, certainly what I learned through self-publishing, but then what I have since learned for people who even traditionally publish, I think there's also this like misconception that in today's world, a publisher will do all of your marketing for you. And that's not the case. Maybe that used to be the case, but really the onus is on the author. And you are your best marketing source. Nobody knows your story better than you do, right? And so like there are things that you can and need and should do to make sure that you're sort of giving your story the best platform, the best like fighting chance for it, to get out there and into the hands of readers. And what I was finding is that I guess I should say like on in my other world, I am a public health professional, but I focus on marketing and communications. And so I was doing a lot of this just like in my day-to-day work. I was thinking about visibility. I was thinking about audience. I was thinking about messaging. And so the things that I did kind of just, because they occurred to me with my first book launch, wound up being very successful. I did in my first 3 months of launching my very first book, I did $10,000 in sales. Now that doesn't account for expenses, right? But I did $10,000 in sales. That's in those first 3 months. And that surprised me. I was like, oh, I didn't think that was going to be the sort of traction that I got right away. And then so I just started, doing things. And then I just kept having people coming to me asking questions, right? Well, how did you do this? Or what is your thought on here? Or how do I get the ISBN? Or how do I get it placed wherever? And, what am I supposed to talk about on social media or these kinds of things? And what I recognized was that I was getting so many of the same questions from people, right? Like there was clearly this need for some answers, and that I felt like, well, I've done the research. I've done the digging. I've done the figuring of this out for you. I don't want other authors spending their time figuring those things out. Spend your time on like your special touch on your marketing work, or spend your time like actually doing those author visits or getting into schools. And so I started putting together some trainings, some online trainings. I started doing one-on-one or group coaching. I had a membership site for a while, for about a little over a year, that I wound up closing down during COVID just because of life. But it was this opportunity to be like, okay, let me help you through this process. And it was really a lot of the work that I do is about sort of getting people through your book launch. And then that sort of, what does the follow-up year look like, right? Because when you launch a book, you're going to have this, increase in sales. You're going to have a spike right away.
Especially if it's your first book, because
especially if it's your first.
Right.
Yes, friends and exactly. And also don't shy away from telling friends and family to buy your book. They're like your most, they might be your most loyal supporters. But then what happens, right? You sort of get through that. And so it's sort of like, okay, what are some other ways to like, sort of keep interest going, but also find some other moments of opportunity for some, sales spikes. And so that's really like where I've kind of focused my time and energy.
So working with authors in the coaching space, and you have authors who are coming to you time and time again at the beginning saying, hey, what'd you do here? How'd you do this? You develop these trainings, do this coaching. Along the way, what would you say are some of those biggest mistakes that authors, particularly new authors, make when they're trying to market and promote and get their book out there? What are some of those big mistakes that authors typically make?
So I would say a couple of mistakes are, one, not talking about your book until it's ready to launch, right? Like you need to have like an audience that is kind of aware that this is coming and excited to purchase, right? So like if you're only talking about your book sort of the week before it launches, you've really missed a key runway, right? To sort of be talking to people. Another thing is that I think people make the mistake of only talking about their book, right? And so like I would go on some of these authors, I would look on their social media or whatever, and I would just see basically like, buy my book, my book is available here, buy my book. And, you need that in there. But I also like, I sometimes I'll tell people like, think about the accounts that you follow, let's say on Instagram, and let's say you follow a chef that you really like. Do you want to see cookbook, or do you want to see the history of this recipe, the steps to it, like a before and after or middle? And same thing if you follow a band, right, or a musician. Do you only want to see album cover, buy my album? Or I'm curious, I want to know what their studio looks like. I want to know what their songwriting process is. I want to know these things. It makes you more invested. And it's the same thing with authors, is like it can't always be just buy my book, or you're just you're tiring that message so quickly.
Yeah, people only have so much of a bandwidth for being sold something. So if it's just the constant, buy it, eventually you're going to lose that audience, and you're going to have to find a whole new one. So you don't want to lose those loyal people who are bought into you, because all you do is just put that one message out. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
As far as like the landscape of marketing, we've seen a lot of shifts, especially, this is a very unique time of life that has happened. We all went through COVID, and there's that shifted some stuff, but kind of taking that out of the picture, how would you say kind of the landscape of marketing has evolved over the years? And just in this, even this short window of the past decade, if you will, how is that?
Gosh. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that, even shortening that to the past couple of years, I think, and this ties in actually like to the previous question, I think a mistake also that people maybe have is thinking or being solely reliant on social media as your marketing platform. I think social media has a place as like a component of your marketing, but we have seen sites and platforms get shut down. We have seen sites and platforms change ownership or change values or whatever it might be. We have seen even the shifts around this like pay to play, right? Like you don't get visibility unless you are running a significant amount of ads and putting a lot of money into ads. And so I think social media is a good place for people to, again, be out there telling all the different components of their story. But I don't focus on it as a sales platform. I sometimes will sell a book or a training directly through a social media link, but it's not my primary space. My website, and particularly my email list. And I think when I say email list or newsletter, sometimes people get nervous. They think that like that's a huge undertaking. That's a whole thing I don't want to tackle. And it is. And I have a little training on email marketing. It is a thing, but it also can just start with email your friends and family and like ask them to share your information, with other people. And what I remind folks of is in this day and age of pay to play, got to have ads, got to, the algorithms that always change and none of us ever know where our stuff is being shown. But what I say to folks is, imagine a day where on the day that you want to promote your book on social media, let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to think of like big brands, right? Like Apple, Target, and Starbucks also have big promotions happening that day. And they have put literally millions of dollars into ads. What do you think the chances are that even your audience who follows you is going to see your social post over these ads? But on the day that you email your friends, family, your newsletter list, and Amazon, what did I say? Apple, Target, and Starbucks also email those same people, they see all of it. It could all come in at 9:06 in the morning at the exact same time. And it's an equalizer. Email is an equalizing platform when it comes to actually having control over how and when your messages are seen by other people. It doesn't mean everybody opens your email. They might just delete it, but you at least got it to them. Right. And I think that that's something that I really try to convey to people is you have control here and you own those contacts. You have no control. None of us have any control, even if you're paying a lot in ads, over like really who's seeing that and what kind of exposure it's getting.
Yeah, especially if you're in quarter four. If you're in Q4 trying to compete when you've got Christmas and Black Friday,
yes,
and now Black Friday is the full month of November, and so you can't compete with these large brand, and even if it's not even other authors or books,
right?
Just the fact that you're not just competing with other authors on those larger selling platforms, you're competing with everybody.
Yeah.
So, you're only selling a book, so you have one small little niche that Amazon is going to try to target to a person. Whereas
Exactly.
Target, Walmart, these other big box store brands, they're putting out there for all kinds of things, and they're dropping tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year on their marketing efforts versus our $10 to $100 that we're putting to run a few ads. And so the competition is significant. I think about in the marketing space, we have a lot of authors that I know that I work with who step into this writing space kind of in the middle of their lives. So they're coming in, let's just say 40 plus years old, that they're starting their writing journey. And, if you're on the younger side of that, you come in, like you've grown up in the space where the internet was formed and then social media happened. So I think in my own life, the internet started when I was a kid, teenager. And then as I got to my adulthood, social media took off, and then social media influencers happened kind of in my, so like all that, we watched all those things happen, but some generations, they weren't raised in that. So those who may be older than I am, they watched all that happen, but it started happening as adults. And so now to step into how do I market, get myself out there, a lot of them are terrified because it's the social media piece seems overwhelming. So I love the aspect of, hey, keep it simple to the things you can control. Anybody can put together a mailing list and send out monthly or quarterly updates to their audience. And that's very helpful for all ages. But I also know that a lot of our listeners are probably, they revert back to what they do know in the marketing space. So they may pick up a book that says how to market your self-published book. And that book may have been published in 2010.
Right.
And it has shifted so much in the past 15 years, and that's why I say, because
even, oh my God, was 2010 15 years ago? Jeez.
Isn't that crazy? So for those authors, I'm just thinking COVID was 5 years ago. So that's what's, and it's shifted a lot since then.
Yeah.
And I think through all those marketing changes, it's hard to keep up with what's just the hottest, latest, best way to market. What would kind of be your advice on how to, get the strong base of a mailing list that you can control, but then how do you navigate? What would be your advice to navigating some of those new trendy marketing things?
So I think, what I kind of tell people is find the marketing channels that you enjoy, because if you hate it, you will never want to do it, and it will always feel forced, right? So I've worked with authors who say, I hate social media. I'm like, okay, don't use it. Like, that's fine, or pick a couple of things. Like, I really, at this point, I only market my stuff on Instagram. It happens, I have feelings about social media in general right now, but as a platform, it's the one that I enjoy using the most. And I've never had my stuff on TikTok. I did have it on Twitter for a little while, or X. I had it on Twitter before it was X. But it's really about, like, pick a couple of things that you actually enjoy doing. Some people, it's YouTube, right? If you enjoy talking to people, like, YouTube is probably a better platform, perhaps. but it's about, you don't need to do all of them. You probably can't even, like, it's not, like, it's probably just not even feasible, but only choose the things that you actually find some enjoyment in. Sometimes no matter what you're doing, it's going to feel like a slog, but like, you can only stick with the things that you're going to enjoy. And with the email list too, you mentioned Amazon. And one thing I also talk to people about is, if you have the capacity and the bandwidth to have your own website and sell through your own website, sell through your website. Doesn't mean you can't also have Amazon, but I do something like 90% of my sales come through my own website. And when my first book, and when I did that $10,000 in those first years, I wasn't on Amazon. I wasn't on Amazon for the first year of that book. I wasn't sure how to set it up. I didn't know what to do. I really was just kind of like, I don't know, I'm just going to tell people, about this and see what happens. Now, all of my books are on Amazon, but I never promote to that site. I never say, go here to buy my book. And part of that is because of the email marketing and when you sell a book on Amazon, you have no way of contacting that customer. You have no way of thanking them. You have no way of telling them later, hey, I have a new book that came out, or I'm having a sale on my current book. And if you liked it, you might want to buy it, for your nieces, nephews, neighbors, whoever.
Yeah, unless they make the effort, if they follow you on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you have no control.
Yeah. And so I also learned that if you, and I think this is still true, but if you are an Amazon customer, you can leave reviews for things, even if you didn't buy that thing on Amazon. So I've had a number of people who have bought my book from my website, but still left me an Amazon review, which is great, and I asked them to, because I can contact them. I can tell them, thank you so much for purchasing. If you wouldn't mind leaving a review, etc. But again, like when and depending on how you do your Amazon sales, they take anywhere from again, I think this is true as of today, but it's anywhere from 20 to 50% of your sale, depending on if they do the shipping, if you do the shipping. So, there's a lot of reasons why I think selling through your website makes sense. But the primary one is that you then know who purchased from you, and you can contact them, and you can be in touch, and you can build a relationship with them.
Yeah, because from the selling space of this, the business side is we want relationship with customers.
Yes.
And if we don't know who our audience is, you may sell, 100 books today. And if you do that and you don't know who 100 of them are, then they might as well just be a one-off purchase that you may never see again.
Right. You're going to have to put all of that same energy into finding your next 100 people. Right. Whereas I have, this is actually this is a statistic I don't know, but I would like to find out, is how many of my customers are repeat customers. It's a lot. I don't know how many, I don't know what percentage, but I'm guessing at least 40, if not upwards of 60% of my customers are repeat customers, because I know how to reach them. And I can tell them about my things.
Well, and we do know just general business concepts that the cost of retention is a whole lot cheaper than the cost of acquisition. So to gain a new customer is very expensive. So you're going to be running all kinds of ads, and you just got to repeat the cycle as if everybody's always a brand new customer. Yeah. And that especially if you're doing print on demand with Amazon, you're already getting a thin margin on your royalty. And so to then tap into that with your marketing dollars, that's not coming out of Amazon's pocket. That's coming out of your pocket. Yep. So it can get very expensive very fast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, there's, these are tight margins, right? Like when you think of the cost, and the cost of paper has increased. There was a paper shortage a few years ago, and like the cost of printing has gone up. And so when you think about just the ability to retain as much of that sale as possible, really becomes critical.
Yeah. So, you've learned a lot over the years just in your own personal journey, but I'm sure you've learned a lot even just from stepping into the coaching, just watching all these different authors have made some, mistakes or just lack of understanding. So you've learned a lot just by helping others.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little about the coaching side for you.
Yeah.
So you've kind of probably a good chunk now of what you do is evolved around the coaching. So we heard a little bit about that, but let's dive into that some. Just what
Sure.
led you into the coaching space of
Yeah.
helping children's authors?
So, some of it is, like I was saying, I was kind of getting these questions, right? Had an email in my inbox this morning. I'm, looking to self-publish, and I would like, do you offer coaching services? I would love to, learn a little bit more from you. And, part of it is just like in my professional work, so much of what I do is based around like education and training and stuff. And so it's just something I really like. I also just, I was just talking to my colleagues yesterday about work in public health, but I was saying one of my work values is that I like to be relentlessly helpful. Like, I was like, it's just like sort of part of my nature. It's like, I just want to share what I know with people. And so I, was doing that through various things where, this membership site or, the trainings. And the trainings are great because they're things that like people can access them on their own time. They can kind of do it a little bit more self-paced, something you can go back to. But sometimes you just need to sit with somebody for 45 minutes and be like, here's my list of questions. And I'll be like, cool, let's go through your list of questions. Right. And so that's something that like has just been exciting to me. And I've had to dial it back because I just don't have as much time or capacity anymore. But every time I do a session, I'm like, oh, that was fun. Like I just really enjoy it.
That's awesome. So the jumping into coaching, there's a life-giving side for you where it fuels you, just you want to be helpful. And so from the looking at the author side, so it's fulfilling for you because you want to help. But why do you think that having a coach or mentor in this space is essential for those aspiring authors or even growing authors?
I think that part of it is we all need support in this. Like you said earlier, like when you are self-publishing, you are the author, the marketer, the publisher. You shouldn't also be the editor, right? Like you need to find somebody else, and maybe you likely shouldn't be the illustrator, but like we need a team of people because we can't do all the things. And there are a lot of decisions to make. There's a lot of things you have to think through. And I'm not going to be, doomsday to be like, if you make the wrong decision, it's going to tank. But also like if you, I've had people who have, they've gone through like a certain aspect of Amazon publishing where they didn't realize that by doing it through that particular space, they were only allowed to sell on Amazon. They sort of create, and they didn't know that, right? Or, you have people, and that's like, they really haven't thought through their pricing strategy, or they have, there's just a lot of things to think through. And to have somebody who has thought through those things multiple times over and been able to work with others, it's such a time saver, and it's such a worthwhile investment to say, okay, I'm going to sink however much into coaching or training because I'm going to get that back, in book sales. You will. And it's just a matter of like taking the time to really just have somebody help you out and figure it out. It's just going to pay off in your time, in your confidence, maybe a little bit in your sanity. Like there's just so much that you have to do. So just letting somebody help you, I think, is so valuable.
Yeah, because there is the craft side where you have someone who can help you and guide you, but as you're mentioning, it's some of that is the mental side of that's exhausting. So you may not know what an ISBN is, and you may not know what formatting needs to look like, and all that stuff we could solve pretty quickly. Those of us who've walked through this, I always tell those who I coach, I say, hey, your first book is going to wipe you out. And the second book, you're going to be like, this isn't as hard as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And every book after that, you're going to be able to crank it out like it's just a machine.
Exactly.
because you
You're
don't
going
have
to
to
have your
answer
stuff
all those
dialed
questions.
in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, but even if you know all that information, you could put out the book, but there's still the element of nobody else understands what you're going through except
Yeah.
people who also are walking through it too.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that you, as you're mentioning, is having that person who you can just talk with and work it out,
Yeah.
of you're not in this alone, and you have someone who can help you
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
So what have been some of the biggest transformations that you've seen in some of the authors that you've coached?
Mhm. I really would say that I've seen transformations around confidence, around like, it first of all, putting yourself out there and telling people you wrote a book, sometimes even just telling your friends and family is very nerve-wracking. With my first book, I didn't do a launch party because I was sort of like, I don't know who would come. I don't like, I'm not
Right.
really sure. And I've done 2 launch parties since. Let's Meet on the Moon. And like I said, was in the middle of COVID. We did not do a launch party, but I did an in-person launch party for my second book and my fourth book. And I talk about this in my training around designing a successful book launch. I actually made them like charity events where I sold tickets to it. Right. And so I knew everyone was going home with a copy of the book. I
Yeah.
knew that I knew how many people, were coming. I knew that everybody who was coming was going home with at least one copy of the book. Many people bought more there. And then I also knew that like a portion of those sales were going towards an organization that I cared about, and or was like related to the book topic. Right.
Wow. That's
Um,
gold right there. That's
yes. Like it,
incredible.
and I was like, and I was nervous at first to do it, but then I was like, oh, that worked, And so like, I talked to people about like how to do, and it doesn't even have to be for your launch, like how to do like different, like sort of charity book sales and, events and things like that. Because that was something that was like an evolution for me. And that's what I see a lot with authors is people who are like, I'm just not comfortable talking about my book. And I'm like, we got to get you there, because like, unless you're hiring a PR firm, like you are your marketing source. You are the person, that needs to talk about this. And there is no shame in a huge portion of your orders coming from friends and family. They want to support you. Right. But I do remember like order on my first book, order number 49 that came in was from somebody I didn't know. And that was so exciting. I was like, oh, like that's really good. I think it was someone my sister knew, but like still, I didn't know them. And so that was one thing is sort of like, I think building confidence. The other thing transformation that I feel like I've been able to help people work through is understanding the finances around the self-publishing process and what that looks like. And also like helping people get very specific when they have some information they know about what is your break-even number, right? Because when somebody says to me, well, how many books could I sell? I'm like, who knows? Like that could be
One
infinite amounts.
plus.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But so I tell people, I said, don't focus on how many books could you sell. The first thing I want you to focus on is what is your break-even number? And so I know that with my current printer and again, it's been a year since I put out my last book, so maybe pricing has changed, etc. But I'm like, I know if I order, let's say, 250 copies of a book, I know that on my 67th sale, I've paid for all those books and I am now making a profit every move forward. Like, and so I help people look at their exact expenses and think about that, because the idea of selling, maybe it was fine. I have to go back and look, but like but for anyone, it's like the concept of saying, okay, I just bought 500 copies of my book or whatever it is. And I need to sell 500 copies is a good goal and is much more daunting, but the idea of being like, I have to sell 66 copies before I recoup all of that cost. It's much more concrete and like much more manageable to think about how are you going to get your first 66 sales. And I think that that's like a mind shift that I've been able to help people with too.
Yeah. For me, I get asked that question too. And like my break even point. So the first book I wrote,
Mhm.
my wife and I, there's a treasure hunt that's associated with it.
Yes.
And so we hid treasure, and
Yeah.
$5,000 worth of treasure that we hid around the United States, for families to go find for these, it's a family adventure connected to it.
It's
So
so
my
cool.
break even point took a lot. I was, 4 books in before
Yeah.
that one broke even on profit,
Right.
between the initial expenses plus that
Right.
treasure that I had to
Yes.
break even on. So, uh, now other books were a whole lot faster to get to that break even point, but I
Hmm.
think it's great advice. A few great things, if you're listening or watching this, two great things there. One, knowing that break even point, man, that's very valuable. But what Lauren just talked about with that launch party and connecting it to
Hmm.
something even greater, it shows the value of having a coach who can help
Yeah.
you think outside the box on what you may be thinking, okay, this is all I can do.
Yeah.
And having that coach who can help you think outside the box. So Lauren, from your side here, maybe there's an author who they're listening to this, and
Yeah.
for them they're on the fence about, is it worth the investment for me to
Hmm.
have someone to come alongside me and help me in this journey as a coach? What would you say to that person who maybe they're on the fence right now?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think about saying to folks like, what is your goal state, right? Like, where are you right now? Are you in a space right now where you're nervous, you're overwhelmed, you are frustrated? What does your goal state look like? And what's the fastest way to get to that goal to that goal state? And is it spending 45 minutes or 3 45-minute sessions with somebody to help you get there? I think is clearly um, like I said earlier, it's something that's just going to pay off, because your time is so valuable. And if you can have somebody help you get through some of these checkpoints that every author needs to hit, that's the thing is it's not like saying, oh, we need to figure out for you how to self-publish a book. Like, no, we all are kind of doing the same thing. And if you can have somebody just show you through that process so that you can focus your time, your attention on what makes you stand out online, where can you find additional people for your email list? Where's the cool local venue that makes sense for your book to have this party? And what kind of partnership can you develop with that? Those are the places where you should spend your time and energy, and letting somebody help you, whether it's me or somebody else, like, I think is just an incredibly fruitful use of your time and your understandably limited resources. But like thinking about this as like having a marketing or a training budget as an author so that you can continue to learn, um, is is going to pay off in book sales.
Yeah. It's like any other space. You only know what you know, and
Mhm.
coaching and training is so valuable. And if you're only just going to shoot from the hip on where you pull that training from or what
Yeah.
you're going to get trained on, you don't even know what you need. So
Yeah.
having someone who's walked down those steps, and especially someone like Lauren who's gone through the publishing side and helped other authors succeed and think outside the box, I think it is very valuable to you. If you're listening, if nothing else, it's for you. You just go check out her website because she's got some trainings and things like that on there that'll be very valuable for you. But having that person to actually communicate with and talk to
Yeah.
is a very helpful piece as well, because it's customized. Then you can watch a
Yes.
training video. Part of what we're doing on the children's author show is I'm providing some trainings about topics, but I'm painting with a broad stroke.
Sure.
And if you want the specialized, customized to your personality, your book, your situation, having a person to help you take that concept and make it apply to your situation and your brand and your journey is a game changer. It makes all
It
the
is a game
difference.
changer. Yeah,
So what
absolutely.
would you say, maybe as just, as we're getting kind of to a close here, one piece of advice that you would give
Mhm.
to maybe an aspiring children's author? Maybe they want to do this and they're overwhelmed thinking about it. What would be that one piece of advice you'd give to them?
I think that I think I would say to folks that yes, there's a lot of like getting a book out in the world, it takes a lot, but also the world is big enough for all of our stories, right? And like the thing about, I think that like about children's books is what I also love about this space is like, is that for people who love children's books, for kids, for adults, for caregivers, like if I put out a book and somebody loves my book, there's no reason why they're not also going to buy your book, Andy, and love your book, right? Like, and so I feel like it's like one of the least competitive spaces in some ways, because like people want more of these, and their needs and their reading preferences change over time. And so I always just try to remind people, especially folks who are just starting out, with like, I don't even know if I should do this. I just like to tell people like, there's room for all of our stories. And so like put yours out in the world and like see what impact it can have.
I love that. You know, whether even if it's no matter if you want to do it commercially, you're trying to sell to everybody, or if it's just something that's on your heart to do.
Yes.
I love that. Get it out there, because there's space in this world for it. That's great. I love that little piece of encouragement advice. Where can listeners or watchers of the show find you and your books? Where's the best place for them to go?
The best place to go is laurenranalli.com. I've got my books on there. I've got my trainings on there. I've got a blog, where people can get lots of tips. And you can reach out to me if you're interested in coaching sessions. But yeah, laurenranalli.com is the place where I show up the most.
Awesome. And on Instagram, are you on there as well?
I am.
Social media wise, is that the
yes,
best place
Instagram,
to find you?
and you can find my Instagram, on there. I think I'm Lauren.Ranalli_author on Instagram. But yeah, that's
the website, and hit that Instagram button. It'll send you there, right?
You can find me.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a great interview. I appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing just your journey, your expertise with us today, and not just from your own story, but from stories of those you've helped along the way. I think that's very inspiring to many of our listeners out there. And speaking of you as our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple and Spotify, or if you're watching us on YouTube, or maybe you don't realize we have this on YouTube as well, check us out on YouTube, leave us a comment. Those comments go a long way, because it helps, one, for us to know your reaction to the videos. We can have some conversation about, just like Lauren was saying, with our community, to know that we can interact is very helpful. We don't want you just to be a one-off who listens to this. We'd love to hear from you. And so that helps us provide valuable content for the future as well. So leave us a comment. We'd love to interact with you there on our YouTube channel. Of course, be sure to connect with Lauren at laurenranalli.com. That's LaurenRanalli.com. And you probably will forget that I just said that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this in the show notes for you so you can connect to her. You can just click that button. That'll send you directly to her website to find all those great training videos that she has out there. Learn about her books that she's published, as well as, if you're interested in doing some coaching, she would love to have a conversation with you about it. If you're serious about turning your children's book into a sustainable brand, I do want to encourage you to check out my top-selling resource. It's the Children's Author Toolbox. It'll be a great resource for you. It's packed full of practical strategies, industry insights, and pretty much everything you need from going from being just a writer to becoming that recognized author brand. So grab you a copy of that. The link for that will also be in the show notes as well. Thanks again to Lauren Ranalli for joining me today. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Andy. This was great. I loved it.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to see where this journey takes you in the days and weeks and months and years to come as you continue to grow in your journey as well. Thanks to our audience for tuning in to the Children's Author Show. Keep watching for more tips, inspiration, and expert advice as we bring you some of the best in the industry. We'll see you next time.